and they realized that to reach the levels that are stated as dangerous by another ministry in Sweden, you have to eat 320 packages of chips per day. This is interesting. And then you have, besides all these considerations that policies might not work directly, some policies do work directly, believe me. But there is a problem here. People tend to react to incentives. There is a very classic example in macro, in national economics, which is the window tax. I don't know, those of you who study economics probably have heard about it. It was a tax enacted by the British royalty in 16th centuries, somewhere in the end of the 1670s, I think. That put a tax on windows. And the thinking was, the aristocracy has houses with a lot of big windows, then we should tax the windows, and we will get a lot of money. What did this lead to? People started removing the windows in the houses. Obvious solution. You don't need that much windows. You can live in a house without that many windows. You can have one window in your bedroom and one in your living room. That's enough. So what happens? The government didn't get any revenue and there was a net welfare loss. And this is very classic because it tells you a lot about these markets also. You increase the tax on tobacco, you get a lot of smuggling. And people get worse cigarettes and you feed criminality. Same with alcohol. In Sweden, there are estimates that about 10 to 20% of all alcohol consumed is either smuggled or privately imported. So you actually, by introducing taxes, you actually decrease your, this curve. If you increase taxes, this is 100%. Obviously, if you increase taxes by more than a certain amount, you actually lower your income. That might be the case. Same with cigarettes and same with alcohol. You feed criminals. The classic example here is, of course, Al Capone, and in the US with his mafia. The only reason why he was so successful was the prohibition, because he had ships outside the coast shipping in liquor that people still wanted to buy. And that is a very good example of how people react to incentives. If you ban something that people really want, or if you put a tax on it, they will not pay the tax outright. They will find a way to go around this. And we also have a quote. I don't know if this is for real. I will read it for you, and you will tell me. It says that it's a Finnish proverb. Give me a second. All right, I remember it. It goes like this. Pengarna till spriten ligger alltid högst upp I byrålådan. It's basically the money for a liquor is always highest up in the drawer. Judging by your reaction, it was not a very famous proverb. I don't know, it wasn't me that put it there. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about that. So basically what happens is you decrease the welfare of your citizens and you get nothing in return. Is it really plausible to have policies whose only result is decreased welfare? I don't think so. Some people might think so. And then the kind of the last point that is content-wise, it's on rationality. It's a very interesting question that if you look on different kinds of addiction, you are faced with. Can there be such a thing as a rational addiction? If you are a perfectly rational, grown-up adult and you don't have an addiction to, for instance, alcohol, can I, today, sit down, think about it, and decide that I want to drink a lot of alcohol every day, factor in all the future costs of alcohol, and still decide to drink alcohol? Because that would mean that there is a reasonable, rational scenario for being addicted to something. And if you think about it, you're all addicted to something. You drink coffee, you eat sweets, you eat food for that part, you breathe air. Without these things, you wouldn't survive. Some of these things are nice to have, they're not need to have. But you can live without sweets, you can live without coffee for sure, but I'm sure that a lot of you drink a lot of coffee. And probably if you ask the public health minister, they would tell you drink too much. I'm sure they would. So this was investigated by a quite famous economist. His name is Gary Becker. He got the Nobel Prize in economics for different research, but he showed that it can be possible to factor in the costs of addiction and still make a rational decision. So for instance, if you decide to smoke, on average smoking reduces your life by, say, 7 years. If your enjoyment of smoking is so high that you wouldn't want to live without smoking, then obviously you will be smoking. And it's a perfectly rational choice, because you're enjoying it so much. This might sound a little bit taken to the extreme, but if you look at it in less extreme cases, like candies, it's quite plausible, yeah?
Jag måste säga här att det här är flest som börjar röka, så det gör det när det är till 15 år.
That's true. That is another problem. I mean, the problem with smoking there is not the actual smoking, right? It's that you can buy cigarettes when you're not an adult. Because, I mean, you can't really blame cigarettes in general for that people start smoking when they're 15, right? It's the same with candy. I mean, you wouldn't argue that people start eating candy when they're 10 and then continue for their whole lives because they're so stupid or because they can't get rid of the addiction. I mean, you grow up and you realize the risks. It's.
Jag vill kommentera att det är bara hälften som jag försöker sluta röka av de som röker.
Yeah, I'm not.
På det sättet är det lite annorlunda än godis.
Yeah, I'm not trying to defend smoking in any way. I'm not smoking myself, so for me the rational solution is not to smoke, and I don't drink too much either. I mean, and I exercise quite a lot. But that's your own choice. I mean, I still love ice cream, and I wouldn't want to live without eating ice cream. It's like I have to eat ice cream sometimes. It's an addiction. And I think it's perfectly rational because I didn't get a lot of ice cream when I was a kid. But the interesting thing here is to counter a little bit, at least to nuance this discussion we're having, is that recent research have shown that smokers tend to overestimate the risks of smoking. So if you ask smokers how dangerous smoking is, they think that it is more dangerous than it actually shows to be statistically. And this is a very interesting, very, very interesting conclusion, because it means that people decide to smoke or not to quit, even though they perceive the risks to be higher than they actually are. And this tells you something about, at least that they are not uninformed. I mean, you cannot say that people smoke because they don't know the risks. They know the risks. They think they are actually bigger than they are, and they still smoke. So at least it gives you some nuance. Gary Becker himself, he said that the myopic theory, that people are stupid and irrational, if that's 0, and his theory of rational addiction is a 1, then statistically wise, you get about 175. So it's kind of, the rational model is kind of good in most circumstances, but not perfect. But this puts another, I mean, the rationality is one thing. The other thing is the democracy aspect, because some things the state can't decide for you. And as I said before, the state borrows its power from the people. It's not the other way around. We don't vote for the state to tell us how to vote in the next election. That's obvious, and I don't need to say this. But we vote for the state to tell us how to behave in our private lives. This public health ministry tells people how to behave in their sexual lives. They actually monitor the participation in elections, because that's a measure of participation in society, and also part of this utopian definition of health. So it's more complicated than just being a question of smoking or not smoking. So we're short on time, and I'll try to finish this nicely in a few minutes. What are the alternatives to public health policies in their current forms? Basically, what we write a lot about is different kinds of private paternalism. There's a very big difference, because when the state is paternalistic, you can't choose. If your insurance company tells you that if you smoke, you pay a 50% premium, that's not violence in the same way. They don't demand taxes from you. You don't have to get an insurance, and you're still free to smoke. So it's a completely different thing. That's one of the examples of how a free market system can solve this dilemma with incentives. But another interesting view is that you don't have to get farther than to Norway to have a completely different view of public health policy. So I will read a quotation for you from a report they produced. It's quite speaking, because it says the following. The Norwegian has empowerment as its central strategy. The strategy is based on the assumption that if people get more power over their own lives, they will become more healthy and behave in a more healthy way. The Swedish emphasis is on changing people's lives conditions, and much less is said about the role of the individual. And that's very true. If you focus on that poor people smoke a lot, and then you're trying to remove tobacco, then that's one overview. If you look at that, if everyone becomes richer, then people stop smoking. And that actually was happening in Sweden since the 80s. But there hasn't been any radical changes to the policies. Then you get the bigger picture, that the health questions are first and foremost the responsibility of the individual, and that by empowering people, people can actually be more healthy. So that's basically what I had to say there. I have a last quotation for you from a person I love. It's Robert Heinlein in the book The Czar's Mistress. And it goes like this. There is no worse tyranny than to force a man to pay for what he does not want, merely because you think it will be good for him. And I think that kind of summarizes the whole discussion on the public health policy field. The state tries to force people to do things they do not want and pay for them. So be observant. Good luck.